Legend of Total War here, and today this is a little bit of a tutorial on how to like do an early campaign, like a pro start. Now, there's a lot of things I want to cover in this video, and one thing that I really want to cover is in terms of merchants. Now, over my time on YouTube, I have been very flippant towards merchants. It's because it doesn't suit my playstyle. Now, I've been getting, not lots, but I get messages throughout the years from people, disputing what I say about merchants, and it comes down to three categories of the messages are, the same. There's three different variations. There's the first type is where people just explain to me how merchants work, but I've always known how merchants work. Just because I don't utilize a mechanic sometimes doesn't mean I don't understand it, and I'm going to show that I do understand how it works in this campaign, in this video. The second way is that people try to explain to me or try to convince me that merchants are actually good, and they basically want me to stop, insulting the merchant play. And whilst I'm not trying to insult your way of playing, it was more of a case of the merchant for my style of play doesn't work. And now I've always said that however you want to play Medieval 2, that's entirely up to you. There's no right or wrong way to play it. But there is definitely more effective and less effective ways of playing this game. There's undoubtedly, okay? And I make the argument that the merchant play is a less effective way to play it. And I will provide evidence in this campaign, and I'm willing to listen to other people's opinions on where if they dispute it. But if you're going to dispute it, please provide some evidence, because I'm curious. Most people just use emotional arguments or don't provide any evidence at all, and it's not going to convince me. Saying, look, I really like merchants because I make 2,000 gold on them. Okay, yeah, what turn are you on? That kind of stuff. I don't want to get into these arguments with people, but anyway, I do definitely want to address this stuff, and because it's important, got to know what options are available to us in the early game, because the first few turns are very important. It's the most important turns in your campaign. If you do a good job in the early game, you're going to have an easy campaign the rest of the way. If you do a bad job, you're going to have a tough time. Now, some people, what they like to do is they deliberately press end turn 50 times and be like, it's more challenging if you let the AI build up like crazy. Look, if you want to play that way, that's absolutely fine. But that's not a pro strat, okay? It's like a hands tied behind your back strategy. We're not talking about that. Uninhibited strength. What's the best way to go about it? That's what this video is about, how to go about it. Okay, so I just want to make that clear so nobody takes it out of context, okay? So you know what I'm talking about, and that we're clear on all the stuff so that nobody needs to get butthurt, okay? Okay, so the third thing that people message me about, and this is the one that needs to be taken with the most grain of salt, is it generally speaking, it comes down to this. They say, not verbatim, but I'm paraphrasing here, Legend, you fucking suck, get good, you suck at merchants. Okay, that's basically the third thing they care about, and that's just, I really just have a laugh when people say that, because they're not providing any real information. They're just clearly just butthurt, or just having a laugh, and that's fine. If you want to do that, that's fine. Whatever. Anyway, so first thing I want to discuss in this video, obviously I'm playing as the Byzantines. This isn't a Let's Play campaign. I've turned off the Fog of War so that we can have a look at the world's resources. So, ready to trade. First 5 turns, what are we going to do? So, first thing we're going to do is understand, if we're going to play the merchant route, what's the best way to go with a merchant? How does the merchant trade work? So, every strategic resource on the game has a value between 1 and 5. Okay? That's its base value. Never changes throughout the campaign. Something that starts off at 1 is always at 1. Something that's at 5 is always a 5. There's other factors that will multiply it, but we'll go into that in a bit. So, wood, for example, and grain, I'm pretty sure are level 1. Resources, and gold is like a tier 5 resource. Okay, now the other thing that will increase the value of a trade resource is the value of the merchant that's sitting on it. Now, do you need to take into mind that merchant trade is completely separate to regular trade. Having high merchant trade does not increase trade 1 bit, not 1 cent. It won't increase it at all. Okay, so when I'm talking about merchant trade, I'm just referring to this here. Okay, just got to be clear on that. So, looking at our starting territory here on the Byzantines, the other thing that affects it is for the tradable resources here, just in general. So like I said, a value between 1 and 5. The merchant skill and then distance to capital in which the resource first appears. So as an example, dyes, grain, and silk, there's another silk there, first appear in Constantinople. So these resources here actually have the lowest multiplier out of any of the resources for the Byzantines at the start of the campaign. Wood, even though it's not worth as much of a resource, is actually worth more than dyes, which I think is a tier 2 resource. I think, I'm not 100% sure. Just because it's close to Constantinople. That's it. So if we have a look at the merchant here, and if we were to take him far away, we can see that the dyes here is worth even less. So taking your merchant far away doesn't always provide extra income for the resource. The resource has to not be present at the, close to the capital. So if we want to increase the value of dyes, like immediately, one thing that we could do, and we'll check the value of resource for the silk as well, is change the location of the capital. Now there's no dyes or silk anywhere close to Corinth. Well, those are the closest one. But now if we have a look, just that little bit of distance change has doubled the value of the dyes and of the silk. And it's also doubled the values of the dyes down here. Now the closest resource to Corinth of those type is still these, but because of the distance, it's increased in value. Now, the question we have to ask ourselves is, by doing that, have we actually made a good financial move? So I'll put you on the silk. Putting him here, all there is exactly the same. Like I said, all... I suspect that these ones are worth more because we own the region. I think owning the region provides a little bit of bonus, but I'm not 100% sure on that. I think there's other tiny little multipliers, but the biggest multiplier is those three that I mentioned. Anyway, so we're currently making 1,786 gold per turn. So if we were to switch it back to the capital of Constantinople, we actually increase in money. So why did that happen? If this went down, why did we increase in money? Well, the capital doesn't just increase trade income, it also provides an area of which corruption is reduced. Okay? So having your capital in the centralized, most richest territory will reduce corruption and public order problems in those settlements. So that's where you want to have it. And at this stage here, it is Constantinople. And it's just unfortunate that you've got a merchant here, and that he probably wants to get a lot of money out of these, and he kind of can't. So what do we do with him then? Well, let's start thinking about moving him to a different resource, somewhere far away. Well, the closest tier 5 resource is gold over here. So that's 6 turns to get there, and it's worth 99. Now, 99 is nothing to scoff at. Now, starting off a campaign, I probably would take this guy over here. However, there's other risks that are associated with this. Now, these risks can be removed by save scumming, so I'm going to assume that we're not save scumming in a pro-strat campaign, right? Now, the risks associated with it, for one thing, is that you've just taken 6 turns to get there, and that's 6 turns where he's not doing anything. Now, during that time, you should not be doing nothing. You should be moving out and conquering. So that's 6 turns where your merchant trade is nothing, okay? Now, another thing is that on his way there, he may come into contact with this guy here, Tosco Deligu, or whatever. Now, the AI get bonuses to their agent actions in this. So your chances of acquiring him is 40%, even though he's a lesser merchant. But his chances of acquiring your merchant, getting his assets, is actually probably higher than 50%, just because it's the AI gets bonuses. I mean, we all know that AI gets cheats in Total War games. In Medieval 2, the AI gets the least amount of cheats out of any other Total War game. At least that's what it feels like. But they do get some cheats. So putting yourself in this position here, even if you were to come in contact with him, you're not in an advantageous situation. So if you're going to play a safer route that was going to get money, there are other options to go. So we can go down to where there's higher level resources, being ivory. Now, ivory is also a tier 5 resource, so why is it worth twice as much as gold? Because the first instance of it appearing is so far away. It's all the way in Dongola. It's a very rare resource. It barely appears anywhere. So going all the way down here could be the best way to make this guy make a lot of money. But we have to take into consideration travel time. Now, that is probably about 13 or 14 turns. Okay? Keep that in mind. Now there is still one more region that is even better to go to, and that's Timbuktu. Now most people, when they argue against my points of how I always being flippant towards merchants, will say, Legend, if you put merchants in Timbuktu, you will make fucking fortunes. I've made 10 grand off of my merchants at Timbuktu before. And you're absolutely right. But here's the other part of the question I want to ask you. What turn did you establish that? What turn did you get that 10,000 gold from all these merchants here? You can indeed make a lot of money here. But what turn did you arrive there? Because if you're playing as the Byzantines, Holy Roman Empire, Hungary, Russia, all these people can't get here very quickly unless you want to use the movement bug. And guess what? The movement bug doesn't work on merchants. So if you want to use the movement bug to conquer here, that's certainly an option. But I certainly wouldn't conquer Timbuktu first, because then you have to build up the grain exchange, hire all the merchants. It takes time. What turn did you get to here and establish that trade resource? That's what I want to ask, because I've never done that before, playing as one of those things, because I see that as a poor waste of time, poor usage of my time, of the turns. But you know what? I do acknowledge that you can make a shitload of money through Timbuktu. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 good trade resources in this area here. That's if you don't include the slaves as well, which are good trade resources, just not as good. So, those are your options there at the beginning of the campaign. Now, of course, you've only got one merchant. But it's like, oh yeah, but you've only got one, right? Surely if you had more merchants, since they have no upkeep, you'd make more money. You're absolutely right. Let's go about recruiting some merchants, shall we? Agent limit reached. How do we go about that? Okay, well we need to make a market, right? Well, guess what? Building the market upgrade here will not provide us with an extra merchant. And I'll prove that by cheating, because we're just making a point here. We're not actually... Whoops. Didn't spell. It correctly. Gotta capitalize. Doesn't actually increase it. The limit. So, you're gonna have to go to another settlement then. Alright, well let's build the grain exchange here. Okay, so, what's the downside of doing this? Because you've got to weigh up the pros and cons. You might think, oh, there's no downside. Well, you've only got one build slot and there's a lot of other buildings there. Is that really the best building that you can purchase? So looking at this will give you another merchant, and it will increase your trade here by a whopping 9 gold. This costs 600 gold. That'll take you more than 60 turns to get that money back, based on those rates there. That's not a good return on investment. I mean, if you're here for the long haul, sure, maybe. It's a return on investment, but I'll tell you, there's better. Land clearance. Land clearance is what I always go for at the beginning of the campaign. Why? Population growth. Why population growth? Because it doesn't start off with much. You've got to get it started early. And I don't go chivalry, so I'm not going to have governors sitting here boosting population growth. I'm also usually keeping the taxes pretty high, so that's gonna drop that population growth. So we're going to need to get that growing. And if we left it at normal here, that would double the population growth, getting us to 6,000 in half the amount of time, getting us towards Minor City. What does Minor City do? It gives us access to new buildings, new trade routes, new troops, and an extra free garrison slot. Very good to upgrade your settlements. You want to get to huge city. You want to build up your settlements as fast as possible, because if you're a pro strat player, you're going to be able to manage public order in this game. It's really not that difficult. You just got to keep one thing in mind: when you capture a new settlement, sack it. Okay, it gets rid of all the unrest. Okay, and then build up the population again from there. Okay, so I go with this. In addition to the population growth, it also provides 60 gold from farming. And that's 6 times as much as the grain exchange. Now, whilst the grain exchange provides a percentage increase to our finances, that percentage increase is not a big deal right now. Right now, a static increase is actually more important. Come 40 turns into the campaign, the grain exchange will provide more value than the land clearance. So build it then. Now, assuming of course we're going to go the merchant route, okay? We're still building this first, right? Because we've already determined it's more effective, right? Because unless you want to get another 37 from silk, but we've already determined that the land clearance will actually still account for that. Not to mention the increase in population will increase taxes, and it increases trade income as well. Not by very much, but at the beginning of the campaign we don't have much trade, we don't have much what's it called? Don't have much trade routes. Once you've got lots of imports and exports, loads of settlements, this trade income goes through the roof. But right now, don't worry about trade income. Focus more on the static incomes. Focus on the trade income once you've actually got those settlements and you've got the population up first, because then you really start raking in cash. So we want to do land clearance first, and then you probably want to go the next tier of land clearance after that to triple, your population growth from what you had initially. Then you might want to go with town hall to quadruple it, get it 2%, and also provide some law, for public order for the increase of population. Then you might want to go with port to get that. It'll also create more trade. It'll create a trade route to another settlement. Provided you get a trade agreement, or I don't really bother with trade agreements. It'll trade internally within your empire, because by the time I've built that, I've usually conquered quite a few settlements. Again, we're going for pro strats. We're not doing for role plays or anything like that. So at what point are we building the fucking grain exchange? Pretty later on. So we're not really building the Byzantine merchant. Not here. Not anytime soon. The same sort of method we'll go with here, except with this one here, we've got very fast access to easy money through mining. Now, in addition to that, you're not just spending money on buildings. Now, what I would do at the beginning of this campaign is I would send you over here. I'd send you over here.
Yes, my lord.
I'd send you over here.
Yes.
And send you over here. And I'd probably do something with these guys here, but let's just leave it at that for the time being, okay? Now, that will then require us to hire some garrison. Just some cheapo crap. Just to maintain public order. So this is all money that we've spent. Now, I did spend some money making a point at the beginning of this, so let's add that back. Just to assume that, you've only got so much money at the beginning of the campaign. To assess it. So this is how much money we would have, assuming we didn't purchase that marketplace there. It's not really providing much income in here, so don't get too hung up about it. Constantinople here has got roads to build, so you probably want to build that, or even the shipwright. The shipwright, not the merchant's wharf. It's a little bit bugged in vanilla. This provides with the extra trade route, which is oftentimes why you'll see this flashing here, because it thinks it doesn't have as many trade routes as it does. So don't worry too much about the flashing numbers. Just worry about where the income's actually coming from. Another thing that I love about Medieval 2, this isn't a video going on about how great Medieval 2 is, but just this income breakdown of trade. This is just one city's trade income. You don't see this in the new Total War games, and I mean, I know the UI is probably a bit ugly. It's like taking up the entire screen to look at this. But look at the dynamic breakdown. You can see we're importing money from importing goods from timber. Oh my god, importing timber from a province we don't have. We're making a profit off that. We're exporting to Heraklion as well. Grain, dyes, silk, the things that we have in the province. We're land resource trading as well. You get a good breakdown from this stuff. And I just think it's good, as opposed to the static, faction-wide income that you get. I'm going off on a tangent. Let's not do that. I couldn't help myself. Self-control legend. Come on, let's get back to work. Okay, so we're building all these things that are going to provide immediate income, right? Because they provide immediate income. And then,
Yes.
at what point are we hiring these merchants? Probably 5 or 6 turns down the track, 10 turns down the track, 15 turns down the track, by which case, taxes, trade, farming, mining, all of that stuff is starting to get into the high thousands, maybe even tens of thousands. By 5 turns from here, I'd have captured Smyrna, Iconium, Caesarea, Adana, Sofia, Bucharest, Bran, Durazzo, Ragusa, Heraklion. That's being conservative. Okay, and what else would I do? I'd be hiring mercenaries, because when you capture a settlement, you're usually not able to recruit right away, so I fill up my ranks with mercenaries. Now, the mercenaries in this game are a little bit more expensive than levy troops, but the whole point of hiring them is speed, because getting lightning fast warfare is very important. I really want to stress the point of kicking the AI in the nuts early. If you wait until turn 200 before you really start taking the AI seriously, they will have stacks upon stacks of lots and lots of troops. If you hit them in the early game, they are so easy to beat. Now again, I want to stress again, because people take shit out of context all the goddamn time. This is not if you're playing a challenge campaign. This is if you're playing the campaign effective right from the start. You're not holding your hands behind your back. You know, you're not being like, you know, finger in the nose sort of thing, saying, oh, I don't do that because I have honor. This is just about pure effectiveness to get this number up, your faction rating up as high as possible, as quickly as possible. Okay, so let's just remember that, okay, because I know people like to take things out of context all the time. Okay, so while these guys are moving out all these times, we are recruiting, we're making loads of money. Here's the thing as well. When we capture Iconium, as an example, it'll probably make around 800 gold, because it's about the same size settlement as Nicaea, and it wouldn't really suffer any corruption. Do you really think hiring 10 merchants would be worth the same as even capturing Iconium? Not really, you know? So that's why we prioritize that. And then, of course, getting rid of the AI factions, once they're dead, that's power that you don't have to go up against. Okay. Now, a thing that a lot of people, I think, don't really take into consideration, there's money and then there's power. And I want you to consider that power is money, and that, you know, merchants don't provide any power. Okay. Now, armies provide power but cost money. But here's the thing. They cost money, but when you capture a settlement, you sack it, and it pays for that army, oftentimes making a profit from that army that exceeds anything that you would have made from merchants. Sacking Iconium here will probably yield 2,000 or 3,000. You know, that is about 5 turns worth of their expenses. In addition to that, they've just conquered an 800 profit region, and of course, assuming that I've done it, our army's still alive. And then we move on and we capture more things, and we use the money from there to capture to hire more mercenaries. And as we continue moving along here, we find more exotic mercenaries, and we just keep going and going and going until there's nothing left to conquer. And then by the end of it, you're like sitting there on turn 50 and be like, all right, it's time to recruit some merchants. Oh wait, I already finished the game. Why bother? Now, to drive that point home, I'm going to load up another campaign. Here is one that here's an example I provided earlier. I'm going to go to my Denmark campaign from Medieval 2, obviously Medieval 2, that I did about 6 months ago, although I don't remember when exactly. This is the last campaign that I did for Medieval 2 on YouTube. Now, on this particular campaign, I was not 100% on the top of my game, because I was a little bit lazy. I starved out certain settlements instead of assaulting them, and I didn't hire any cavalry. It was a restriction that I put myself on this particular campaign. So what you're seeing here, I probably could have gotten to this point 10 to 15 turns earlier, right? Things we want to take into consideration is the financial breakdown. I'm spending 30,000 on my army. It's a very expensive army, yet I'm still able to make 20,000 profit a turn from taxes, from trade, from mining, from farming, and it's turn 52. It's still fairly early in the campaign. We're still in the 12th century. Okay? Now, in this campaign, I did actually hire some merchants. So let's have a look and see what my merchants are up to. So this is the merchant that I started off with. You know what? I'm going to turn off the fog of war here as well, so that we can have a look at what maybe I should have done if I wanted more money from merchants, right? So looking at him, he's making 38 gold. Now, obviously I didn't move him to a super valuable region. Aarhus is not the capital anymore. Prague is. Like I said before, you want to centralize it. I believe I did check a bunch of regions, and I found that Prague was the best settlement to have for public order and for, you know, to reduce those corruptions. Currently our corruption is 7,800. You know, it's fairly high, but you know, I'll try and bring it down. So I didn't move this guy. He's leveled up a fair bit. What is the best resource we could have or should have put him on? Okay, so I should have switched him on to fish, right? I could have made so much extra money, right? You know, you've heard me say that loads of times in the campaign, because when you look at the trade rate, the income breakdown, I want you to look at this number here, 33164, and I want you to watch what happens when I do this.
Yes, my lord.
Whoa, look at that number go up! You know, it barely went up at all. Okay, now, of course, this is one merchant, and I'm sure people who love merchants are really getting hot under the collar right now. Okay. okay? But this is a norm for what you see in my campaigns, all right? So, and I'm sure they're going, Legend, you're not putting them on the best resource they could be. Okay, like I said, we're going through different examples. All right. So, our capital is Prague. That means that timber, coal, tin are worth jack shit. Any resources in this area here are worth jack shit, and it'll be worth the same anywhere. So if we have a look at timber, timber's worth 10. So actually, timber might not actually be a tier 1 resource. I don't know. It doesn't matter. But we can see here that amber is actually fairly close by. And this is probably why fish is worth more, because it's further away. Now, of course, there is a secondary use for merchants, which is merchant acquisition. So if we have a look at that, we do have a 52% chance of doing that. But 50-50, if you've watched any of my campaigns, how the fuck often do I lose on dice roll chances? All the goddamn time. Remember the Russia campaign? 95% chance success, fail. Then 85% chance success, fail, twice in a row. I don't like to dice roll. I have notoriously bad luck, okay? You should, when I've only gambled a few times of my life in casinos, and I have the most disgusting bad luck I've ever seen. I have gotten odds that were against my favor, 1,000 to 1, and it still happens. You know, I'm at roulette and I'm betting on red, and it gets black, 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 10 fucking times in a row. I've had that happen to me. I don't know what it is. I just, dice roll wise, I tend to be very bad luck with that kind of stuff. So I tend to avoid dice rolls as much as possible. I do not pray to RND Jesus. RN Jesus. That's not my way, you know. That's, you know, putting them on a resource is safe, okay? Again, if you want, you can manipulate it by quick saving, quick loading, but, you know, if you want to play that way, I'm not saying you can't do it. I'm not even criticizing it. Fine, I've played that way before. But that's not a pro strat. Anyway, so let's see where we could have put him. So looking around on resources around the world, you know, on a developed map, you know, in Europe, there's not a whole lot of places that provide a whole lot of wealth. So, you know, this is turn 52, and like I said, the value of these resources don't go up. So marble mine over here, 61, well, the fish is still worth more. So, I mean, gold over here, 143. You know, that's nothing to scoff at. You monopolize the gold resources, you can make a lot of money off that. Absolutely, there's no doubt about that. But would 141 really matter at this stage here? And remember my explanations at the start of this. We wouldn't have hired merchants until at least turn 20. Or what happened in this campaign, I didn't build any grain exchanges, ever. I just didn't build them. But what happened is that I captured some. So if we use this example over here in Moscow as an example, when I captured this settlement, would have been fairly recently, I captured a marketplace here. You could tell I definitely didn't build it here because it's got brackets Eastern European. Any building that has brackets, whatever culture it is, means you didn't build it. If you built it, it wouldn't have... Yeah, see, church there doesn't have any brackets. It means that I built that there. Now, if we have a look at this guy, he's 51 years old. I've had him for quite a while. I probably would have hired him here. And he's making 39 gold. And he's not a bad merchant. Maybe I shouldn't have left him there. But where should I have put him out here? Again, I hired him just because I could have. And he probably did make his money back. But it's about return on investment based on time. Yes, he would have made that money back. Probably twice as much. You know, 550. He's made me 1,000. Good. Profitable venture. But at the same time, it's sort of like I can scoff at that when I think about how much money and power that my military has gained me. Because my army now, that I spent money on, all of the settlements that it's gained me here, these are permanent places where I make money that had to be conquered. I didn't buy these settlements. I've paid for it in blood, and so did my enemies. And look at these settlements here. Look, Vienna here making 4 grand. And all it did was no downside here. This is completely free upkeep. And what am I prioritizing? Population growth. Why? Because it's almost at large city status, and I could have increased the taxes even further. I didn't even bother because I got so much cash here. If we have a look at my army compositions, you know, getting down here to Jerusalem, and the only reason I came down to Jerusalem here was so that I can win the campaign because it was part of the conditions. If you're not worrying about victory conditions, I probably wouldn't have even bothered. I would have conquered everything along the way. And even then, I can't remember exactly what oh no, that's Venetian capital. It's a similar color, that's all. If you have a look at my armies, most of them are mercenaries. So I've got so many mercenaries, a lot of expenditure, and I'm still making a fortune. And I'm making 799 from merchants. Again, we're looking for areas where we could have merchants. Okay? And of course, we haven't looked down to these areas down here. Why? Because, You know, would it have made that much? Not really. Not really at all. I mean, we could have acquired those guys if I wanted to come down there, but we conquered Europe first. Okay, so that's sort of like where I got to. 52 turns into a campaign. If you're playing on a pro level, you should pretty much be done with a campaign. Again, I restricted myself to not having any cavalry in this particular campaign, but I think I've since formatted the hard drive since some of my previous campaigns, like my Venice campaign or my Holy Roman Empire campaign that I did, which would have gone even better than this. I don't think I hired a single merchant in those, and they had the exact same results. You know, I had conquered the entire world before the Mongols even arrived. You know, the Mongols still have 10 turns before they show up. Because, you know, when I move with cavalry, I can move a lot faster. But, you know, that's a whole other story, talking about, you know, what army compositions. Just do whatever you want. But more talking about merchants versus lightning warfare. And you do your lightning warfare however the hell you want. Again, to reiterate my points, I'm not trying to sit here and say that hiring merchants is bad. I've said and acknowledged that you can make a lot of money through merchants. But it's a matter of when do you get to that point. Sure that these men here are making a profit. They are making a profit, no doubt about it. You know, 799 is not that much to scoff at, even though it's like 10% of my next lowest income, which is mining, which another one that I don't really prioritize that much. Depends on what regions we get for mining. You know, depends on the play style. If you want to play slow, merchants are the way to go. But also, don't use mods to compare vanilla with, because sometimes mods make tradable resources a hell of a lot more valuable than vanilla. As an example, beginning of the end times Warhammer mod, where the tradable resources on that could yield for a tier 1 merchant 1 to 2,000 gold if you get it on Warpstone. But again, we're not talking about that. So I'll often get people saying things like that. Well, in stainless steel, you can. Well, we're not talking about stainless steel, okay? Okay, right? Keep it to what we're talking. Keep it on topic, you know. And I need to reel myself back in sometimes as well on topic. Again, don't want to say that doing the slow campaigns is not a wrong way to play it, but it's not the effective way. So that is why I, you know, make fun of merchants, because it seems insignificant in comparisons to when we sack Jerusalem or sack any settlements and we make 20 to 30 or even 40,000 gold, you know, in a single turn, and then we've captured a settlement worth, you know, a fair bit of money, and, you know, killed an enemy. Because you got to consider as well, your power is also relative to your enemy's power by comparisons. Okay, you might have a big empire, but if you've got big enemies, that doesn't make you good at the game, or, you know, it doesn't mean you've done an effective job. Like sitting here, looking at this. If we have a look at this, this is usually what it goes. So, you know, faction rating at 400,000 by turn 52, right? And again, don't use this as a comparison, because this is not the best campaign I could have done for it. It doesn't matter right now. If we have a look at the other factions, part of the effectiveness as well is looking at all the factions that have plummeted because they've come into contact with us. And there's a few factions that haven't come into contact with us, like I think the Byzantines. Are we with them? Yeah, we are, but I didn't really prioritize them. You know, taking out your enemy, using armies to kill your enemies. Because here's the thing: if you don't kill your enemies, they're gonna come. You're gonna have to fight them no matter what. So fight on your terms, not theirs. That's why I always hire armies first over merchants, or even over buildings. Anyway, I've gone on for 33 minutes on this video, more than that, and I think I've made the points I want to make. Again, I'm going to continue to make fun of merchants for my campaigns because they are silly on my particular campaigns. But I also acknowledge that merchants in general are not bad mechanics. Okay, I have no problem with merchants being in this game. I think it's an interesting mechanic. I kind of wish they'd have something similar in other Total War games. It's just, in terms of a pro strat, you don't need to do it. In fact, avoiding it really doesn't impact your campaign at all. That's all I'm trying to say. Anyway, I hope this gives you guys a little bit of understanding about why I make these flippant jokes about merchants. Hope it gives you some understanding on, if you want to become better at the game, what the mindset that I go through when I start a campaign, and why my campaigns end up just painting the map so quickly. That's how I go about it, and why merchants just don't really have a part in that. And of course, finally, I had to stress this again, I'm not trying to insult anyone's way of playing. If you want to play slow, there's nothing wrong with that. It can be very fun. I just don't do that. They don't make good YouTube series. Anyway, that's the end of this video, and I'll see you next time, fuckers.